The leather strap cracked across Vesper Thornfield's back with the sound of splitting wood, and she bit down on her tongue so hard she tasted copper. 23 lashes she'd been counting silently, as she always did, and Mordecai Grimm wasn't. Finished. Worthless orphan trash, he spat, raising the belt again. Can't even scrub floors without breaking something. The broken pitcher lay in shards at her feet, its contents spreading across the general store's wooden planks. An accident she'd stumbled when her vision blurred from hunger, but Grimm never cared about reasons, only results. And results meant pain. The 24th lash never came. Instead, the store's front door exploded inward with a crash that shook dust from the rafters. Through the splintered doorway stepped a figure that made Vesper's breath catch in her throat, 6.5 feet of raw Apache warrior. Bronze skin gleaming with war paint, black hair flowing past his shoulders like a raven's wing. His dark eyes swept the scene with lethal intensity. Vesper on her knees, blood seeping through her torn dress, Grimm frozen with the belt raised high. Those obsidian eyes narrowed to slits. "Step away from her," the Apache said in perfect English, his voice carrying the rumble of distant thunder. Grimm's face went white as bleached bone. "Now see here, savage." The warrior moved faster than striking lightning. In the doorway, the next, his massive hand wrapped around Grimm's throat, lifting the storekeeper clean off his feet. "My name is Coda Nightwolf," the Apache said conversationally, though his grip never loosened. "Among my people, I am what you might call an Omega, the protector of the weak, the defender of the defenseless. And you, pale man, have just made yourself my enemy." Grimm's feet kicked uselessly as he clawed at Coda's iron grip. "Can't ... breathe." "Good. Now you know how she feels every day under your roof." Coda's free hand gestured toward Vesper without taking his eyes off Grimm. "How long has this been happening?" 5 years, Vesper whispered, barely able to form the words. Her voice was hoarse from screaming. Her throat raw. Something dangerous flickered in Coda's expression, a wildness that spoke of wolves and winter winds. 5 years of this? He looked down at Vesper properly for the first time, and she saw his jaw clench at the sight of her. 20 years old, but looking older, worn down by constant abuse. Her auburn hair hung in matted tangles, her green eyes hollow with despair. Bruises painted her pale skin in shades of purple and yellow, some fresh, others fading to sickly green. "Please," she breathed, "don't kill him. They'll hang you for it." Coda's grip loosened slightly and Grimm gasped for air. "The lady shows more mercy than you deserve," he told the storekeeper. "But I am not so generous with those who harm the innocent." "She's nothing," Grimm wheezed. "No family, no prospects. Been working off her debt to me since she was 15. Debt." Coda's voice dropped to a whisper more terrifying than any shout. "Room and board, food and shelter. Girl's got to earn her keep somehow." Vesper watched in fascination, as something shifted in Coda's face, not rage, but something colder. "More final, I see," he said quietly. Then, to Vesper, "How much does he claim you owe?" $200, she whispered. "But it keeps growing. The interest, the cost of food, the broken things." Her voice trailed off. Coda released Grimm. So suddenly the man stumbled backward into his counter, sending bottles and jars crashing to the floor. The Apache reached into a leather pouch at his belt and pulled out a roll of bills. More money than Vesper had ever seen in one place. Counted out $250, slapping each bill onto the counter with deliberate precision. "Her debt is paid," he announced. "With interest." Grimm's eyes went wide with greed despite his fear. "Now hold on to this," Coda interrupted, and faster than thought. His knife appeared in his hand, the blade kissing Grimm's throat. "If I ever hear of you laying hands on another defenseless person, I will return. And next time, there will be no mercy." He sheathed the knife and turned to Vesper, who still knelt among the pottery shards. When he extended his hand to her, she stared at it as if he were offering her the moon. "Get on my horse," he said simply. I can't. I have nowhere to go." "You do now." His dark eyes were gentle, despite their intensity. "My name is Coda Nightwolf, and I give you my word no one will ever hurt you again. Vesper had never been on a horse before. Grim had barely let her leave the store, let alone learn to ride, and she found herself seated behind Coda on his magnificent war pony, got paint stallion with intelligence burning in its dark eyes. Her arms encircled his waist tentatively. Afraid to hold too tight, afraid to let go. "Where are we going?" she asked, as they rode away from the settlement of Broken Creek. Behind them, she could see Grim standing in his doorway, holding his throat, and glowering. "My camp is half a day's ride north," Coda replied, without turning around. "In the hills where the white men feared to go, your people won't want me there." Her voice was barely audible over the horse's hooves. "I'm white. My people will welcome anyone I bring home?" There was absolute certainty in his voice. "But first, we stop at the creek. You need tending." The creek he spoke of ran clear and cold between stands of cottonwood trees, hidden from the main trail. Coda dismounted and helped her down, his hands careful of her injuries. In the dappled sunlight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was magnificent, not just in size, though he towered over her 5-foot frame, but in presence. War paint decorated his cheeks in geometric patterns of red and black. Silver ornaments hung from his ears, and a necklace of bare claws rested against his broad chest, but it was his eyes that captured her, dark as midnight but warm as a campfire. "Sit," he commanded gently, indicating a fallen log beside the water. "Let me see your wounds." Vesper hesitated. No one had tended her injuries in 5 years. She'd learned to bind her own cuts, to hide her bruises, to suffer in silence. "I won't hurt you," Coda said, reading her fear. "Among my people, an Omega's duty is to protect and heal. It would be against everything I am to cause you harm." Something in his voice, a deep sincerity that Grim had never possessed, made her trust him. She sat on the log and let him examine the belt marks across her back, the bruises on her arms, the cut on her lip where Grim's ring had caught her. During yesterday's beating, his fingers were surprisingly gentle as he cleaned her wounds with water from the creek. From a pouch at his belt, he produced various herbs and powders, mixing them into poultices that he applied to her injuries. "This will help with the pain," he said, spreading a cooling salve across the worst of the welts. "And this will prevent infection." Another mixture went onto the smaller cuts. "Why are you helping me?" Vesper asked suddenly. "You don't even know." "Me." Coda paused in his ministrations. "Does a man need a reason to show mercy?" "Most do, in my experience." "Then you have known the wrong men." He resumed his work, his touch feather-light on her battered skin. "My grandmother taught me that the spirits send us test moments when we can choose to walk in darkness or light. When I saw you kneeling, they're broken but not destroyed, I knew this was such a moment." "I am destroyed," Vesper whispered, "have been for years." "No." His hand stilled on her shoulder. "Broken things can be mended. Destroyed things leave nothing behind. You spoke up to save my life back there, even after what he did to you. That tells me your spirit burns still." They fell into comfortable silence as he worked. Vesper found herself studying his face, the strong jaw, the aquiline nose, the concentration in his dark eyes as he tended her wounds. There was a peace about him, a centeredness she'd never encountered in another human. "Being there," he said finally, sitting back on his heels, "that should hold until we reach my grandmother. She has greater healing skills than I, your grandmother. She raised me after my parents died, taught me the old ways, the sacred duties of an Omega." He began packing away his medical supplies. "She will want to meet the woman who showed mercy. To her grandson, I didn't show mercy. I just don't want to see more blood." The same thing, from different words. Coda stood and offered her his hand again. "Can you ride further? Sun has passed its peak, and I would have you safe before nightfall." She took his hand and let him help her to her feet. The pain was less now, his medicines working their magic, but more than that. She felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The Apache camp materialized from the landscape, like something from a dream. Hidden in a box canyon where red rock walls rose toward the sky, it appeared empty until Coda gave a specific bird call. Then figures emerged from concealment, warriors and women and children, watching with curious but non-hostile eyes as he rode in with his unexpected passenger. Coda Nightwolf returns, called an elderly man with a weathered face and knowing eyes, and he brings a gift from the spirits. Not a gift, grandfather, Coda replied in English, dismounting and helping Vesper down. A woman in need of sanctuary. Elderly man, clearly a chief or medicine man by the deference others showed him, approached with measured steps. His gaze took in Vesper's condition, the careful way she moved, the healing salve still visible on her wounds. "I am Ayanna Stormwalker," said a woman, emerging from one of the wiki-ups. She was perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair, braided with feathers and beads, but her movements held the grace of someone much younger. Coda's grandmother. "You are welcome in our camp, daughter." The word daughter hit Vesper like a physical blow. No one had called her that since her parents died in the cholera outbreak when she was 15. "I thank you," she managed, "but I don't want to be a burden." Ayanna's laugh was like water over stones. "Child, do you think my grandson would bring home a burden? He sees with the eyes of the spirits. If you are here, it is because you belong here." That evening, as Vesper sat beside a crackling fire, wearing clean clothes provided by the Apache women, she felt like she'd stepped into another world. The camp bustled with activity, women preparing the evening meal, children playing games between the wiki-ups, men returning from hunting or patrol. But it wasn't the foreign customs that amazed her, it was the absence of fear. No one crept around in terror of the next blow. Children laughed freely. Women spoke their minds. Even the dogs seemed more at ease than any creature in Broken Creek. "You're safe here," said Coda, settling beside her with 2 bowls of venison. "Stew? No one will harm you. For how long?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "For as long as you wish to stay." He handed her a bowl, their fingers brushing in the transfer. "This is not temporary sanctuary, Vesper. This is home, if you want it." She stared at him in the firelight. "You don't even know me. I could be a thief, a murderer, anything." "Are you?" "No, but then what else do I need to know?" His dark eyes were serious. He showed courage in the face of cruelty. "You chose mercy when violence would have been easier. You have a warrior's heart, even if you don't know it yet." "I'm not a warrior. I'm just ... broken. So was I once." The admission surprised her. "When my parents were killed by white soldiers, I carried hatred in my heart like poison, wanted nothing but revenge against every pale face I saw. What changed?" "My grandmother. She taught me that an Omega's power comes not from hatred, but from love. Not from taking life, but from protecting it." He gestured toward the peaceful camp around them. "This is what we fight for, not territory or revenge, but the right to live. Without fear." Vesper looked around at the families sharing their evening meal, at the children playing by firelight, and at the elderly couples sitting together in comfortable silence. It was everything she'd dreamed of during those long, brutal years under Grimm's roof. "I don't know how to live without fear," she admitted. "It's been so long, ... "Then we'll teach you." Ayanna's voice came from behind them as she approached with her own bowl. "Fear is like any sickness, it can be healed with the right medicine." "What kind of medicine?" The old woman settled beside them with a smile. "Time, patience, and the knowledge that you are valued not for what you can do, but for who you are." That night, as Vesper lay on soft furs in Ayanna's wiki-up, she listened to the sounds of the sleeping camp, the whisper of wind through the canyon, the soft breathing of the family around her, the distant call of a night bird. For the first time in 5 years, she fell asleep without checking for escape routes, without listening for approaching footsteps. She was safe. The transformation began slowly, like sunrise creeping across the canyon walls. For the first week, Vesper jumped at every unexpected sound, flinched when anyone approached too quickly, ate as if each meal might be her last. The Apache women watched with patient understanding, giving her space but never leaving her completely alone. Ayanna proved to be a master healer, treating not just Vesper's physical wounds, but the deeper damage that 5 years of abuse had carved into her soul. She brewed teas that eased nightmares, prepared salves that made old scars fade, and most importantly, talked to Vesper in the evenings about everything and nothing. Pain shared is pain halved, the old woman said one night, as they sat outside her wickiup, grinding medicinal herbs. But you hold yours close like a treasured possession. It's all I have, Vesper replied, then immediately wondered why she'd said such a thing. Ah, Ayanna nodded sagely. So that is the sickness. You have forgotten that you are more than your wounds. Coda, meanwhile, proved to be a constant but undemanding presence. He didn't push her to talk or pressure her to participate in activities, but he was always there when she needed him, helping her navigate unfamiliar customs. Translating when her limited Apache failed her, standing quietly beside her when the memories became too much. Why do they call you an Omega? She asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek where he'd first tended her wounds. I thought that was just a word for the end of things. Different meaning among my people, he explained, braiding a rope from horsehair. An Omega is the one who completes the circle. Alphas lead the war parties and hunt the buffalo. Betas form the backbone of the tribe, the families, the craftspeople, the teachers, but Omegs, choosing his words carefully. We are the guardians. Of the vulnerable, the ones who ensure no one is left behind. Is that why you saved me? I saved you because it was right. But I brought you home because... He stopped braiding, his hands still. Because the moment I saw you, something in my spirit recognized something in yours. Vesper felt heat rise in her cheeks. I don't understand. Neither do I, completely. But my grandmother says the spirit sometimes binds souls together across great distances. Waiting for the right moment to bring them together, he looked at her then, his dark eyes serious. She thinks you and I have been searching for each other. Without knowing it, the idea terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. What if she's wrong? And we'll discover that together too. By the end of her third week in the camp, Vesper had begun to relax in ways she'd forgotten were possible. She helped the women with their daily tasks, preparing food, tending children, crafting tools and clothing. Her hands, which had known only harsh labor under Grimm's roof, learned gentler skills, beadwork and weaving, herb gathering and cooking. The children especially delighted her. Having never been around young ones before, she was amazed by their resilience and joy. They accepted her presence without question, teaching her games and including her in their adventures with the casual acceptance that only children possess. You're good with them, observed Nayeli, a young mother whose twin boys had adopted Vesper as their favorite playmate. Have you thought about having children of your own? The question hit Vesper like a physical blow. Children had never been a possibility in her mind. Grimm had made it clear that no man would ever want a used-up orphan girl like her. The idea that she might someday be a mother seemed as foreign as flying. I don't know if I could, she admitted. After everything that's happened, healing creates more healing, Nayeli said gently. Love grows from love. When you're ready, your heart will know. That evening, as the camp settled into its familiar nighttime rhythms, Vesper found herself watching Coda across the central fire. He was teaching a group of young warriors how to craft arrow points, his large hands demonstrating the precise napping technique with infinite patience. When he looked up and caught her staring, he smiled, an expression so warm and genuine that it sent butterflies dancing through her stomach. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine a different kind of future, not just survival, but a real life. Maybe even love. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The attack came at dawn, shattering. The peaceful morning with the thunder of hooves and the crack of rifle fire. Vesper woke to Ayanna shaking her shoulder, the old woman's face grim in the gray light. Soldiers, she said tersely. They found us. Through the Wikiup's opening, Vesper could see Apache warriors racing to defensive positions while women hurried children toward the canyon's hidden passages. The air filled with shouts in both Apache and English, punctuated by the occasional gunshot. Where's Coda? Vesper asked, her heart hammering with sudden terror. Leading the defense. It's an Omega. He won't let anyone be taken. Ayanna pressed a knife into Vesper's hand. Stay close to me. We're going to the sacred cave with the others. But as they emerged from the wickiup, a familiar voice cut through the chaos like a blade. There she is, the white girl. She's the reason. We're here. Vesper's blood turned to ice water. Standing at the canyon's entrance beside a cavalry captain was Mordecai Grimm, his face twisted with malicious satisfaction. That's her, he shouted, pointing directly at Vesper. The thief who stole from my store. These savages are harboring a criminal. The cavalry captain, a young man with ambitious eyes and a pristine uniform, raised his voice. By the authority of the United States Army, we demand the return of the white woman and the arrest of any Indians harboring fugitives. Coda appeared, as if from smoke, his war paint making him look like an avenging spirit. 24 Apache warriors flanked him, their weapons ready but not yet raised. There are no fugitives here, he called back, his voice carrying clearly across the canyon. Only people seeking to live in peace. That woman is a wanted criminal, Grimm shrieked. She owes me money and destroyed my property. The debt was paid, Coda replied calmly. I gave you $250 in front of witnesses. Lies. Apache lies. Grimm's face was purple with rage. Captain Morrison, these savages kidnapped her. She's probably been violated by their heathen ways. Something dark and dangerous flashed across Coda's face. You dare speak of violation when you spent 5 years beating an innocent woman. That's different. She was my legal responsibility. She was never your property. The words exploded from Vesper as she stepped forward, ignoring Ayana's restraining hand. I paid for every scrap of food, every night's shelter with my blood and sweat. You had no right. Shut up, girl, Grimm snarled. You'll come back where you belong, or these savages will pay the price. Captain Morrison held up his hand for silence. He was young, but not stupid, and Vesper could see him trying to read the situation. His men were outnumbered and unfamiliar. Territory of direct confrontation would be costly even if they won. Miss, he called to Vesper. Are you here against your will? No, she replied immediately. These people saved me. They've shown me nothing but kindness. She's been brainwashed, Grimm protested. Stockholm Syndrome. Captain, you can't trust what she says. Morrison's gaze shifted between Vesper and Grimm, taking in her obvious health and peace compared to Grimm's frantic desperation. Whatever he saw in her face seemed to give him pause. I need to speak with the woman alone, he announced. No tricks. No weapons. Just a conversation. Coda looked ready to object, but Vesper stepped forward. It's all right. I'll talk to him. She walked across the no man's land between the two forces, very aware that dozens of weapons were trained in her direction. Captain Morrison dismounted and met her halfway, his hand resting casually on his saber hilt. Ma'am, he said quietly, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you being held here against your will? No, Captain. I came here willingly and I stay willingly. The man says you stole from him. I broke a pitcher by accident and he beat me for it. That man, she pointed at Grimm, spent 5 years treating me like an animal. Called it payment for room and board, but it was slavery, pure and simple. Morrison studied her face carefully. These Indians, they haven't mistreated you. They've treated me like family. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid to go to sleep at night. And the big one there, their leader. Vesper felt warmth spread through her chest. Is the finest man I've ever known. He risked his life to save mine, and he's never asked for anything in return, except the chance to keep me safe. Something shifted in Morrison's expression. You care for him? I love him, she said simply, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. And I'll die before I let anyone drag me back to that hell. Captain Morrison stared at Vesper for a long moment, his young face troubled. Behind him, his soldiers shifted restlessly, while Grimm continued his frantic protests. On the other side of the canyon, Coda waited with the stillness of a coiled spring. Miss Morrison said finally, What you're describing, if it's true, changes? Everything. But I have my orders, and this man has filed formal complaints with the territorial government. Then investigate, Vesper said boldly. Send someone to Broken Creek. Ask anyone in town what life was like for the orphan girl living above Grimm's store. Ask them about the screaming they heard at night, the bruises they pretended not to see. I can't, you can't, or you won't, her voice carried across the canyon. Captain Morrison, I'm 20 years old. I'm of legal age to make my own choices.
A man?
She pointed at Grim. Has no legal claim on me. None. She signed papers. Grim shrieked from behind Morrison. An indenture contract. She owes me for years of care. Care. Vesper laughed bitterly. You call that care? She pulled back her sleeves, revealing the fading scars that covered her arms. Does this look like care to you, Captain? Morrison's face went pale as he took in the evidence of years of systematic abuse. Jesus, he whispered. An indenture contract signed by a 15-year-old orphan with no legal guardian isn't worth the paper it's written on, as Vesper continued. And even if it were, Mr. Nightwolf paid the debt. $250 in front of witnesses. Not the point. Grim pushed forward, his face twisted with rage. She belongs, I belong to no one. Vesper's voice rang with absolute conviction. I am a free woman, and I choose to stay here with people who treat me like a human being. Captain Morrison looked back at his men, then at the Apache warriors, then at Grim's purple face. He was clearly a man caught between duty and conscience. Is another way? Came a new voice from behind the soldiers. Everyone turned as an elderly Apache man emerged from concealment among the rocks. He wore traditional clothes, but carried himself with obvious authority, and most surprisingly, he spoke perfect English. Who are you? Morrison demanded. I am Chief Dancing Bear, elected representative of the Mescalero Apache to the territorial government. Perhaps you have heard of me? Morrison's eyes widened. Dancing Bear was indeed Famasa war chief, who had successfully negotiated several treaties and commanded respect even from the white authorities. Chief Dancing Bear, this is an internal matter, is it? When cavalry troops enter Apache lands, to seize a woman who seeks sanctuary? When false accusations are made against my people? The chief's voice was calm but carried unmistakable steel. I think not. He walked forward with measured steps, his gaze moving between Morrison and Grim. This woman has been formally adopted into our tribe under the ancient laws of sanctuary. She is now, legally speaking, a member of the Apache Nation. That's impossible, Grim sputtered. Actually, it's not, Morrison said slowly. The treaties recognize Apache adoption rights. He looked at Vesper with new understanding, but it would require formal ceremony, which was performed last night. Dancing Bear replied smoothly. In anticipation of exactly this situation, Vesper stared at the chief in amazement. There had been no ceremony that she knew of, but she could see the wisdom in his claim. Under territorial law, interference with internal tribal affairs was forbidden without extreme provocation. You have no proof? Grim raged. I have the word of a chief whose signature appears on 3 separate treaties with your government, Dancing Bear replied. Unless you question the honor of the Apache Nation, Morrison was no fool. He understood the political implications of what was happening. Accusing a respected chief of lying could spark a war, while backing down from a clearly abusive situation would be the honorable choice. Captain Vesper said quietly, I'm asking you as one human being to another, let me stay where I'm safe. And happy, please. Morrison studied her face for a long moment, seeing the truth written there in ways that no law or document could convey. Sergeant Williams, he called to his second-in-command. Form the men up. We're returning to base. But Captain Grim started. Mr. Grim, if I were you, I'd be very careful about my behavior from now on, because if I hear any reports of you mistreating anyone else, I'll be back to investigate personally. Morrison's voice was ice cold. I don't think you'll like what I find. As the soldiers prepared to leave, Vesper felt strong arms encircle her from behind. She leaned back against Koda's chest, feeling his heart beating against her shoulder. Is it over? She whispered. It's over, he confirmed, his lips against her hair. You're free. 1 year later, Vesper Nightwolf stood at the edge of the same canyon where she'd first found sanctuary, but everything had changed. Where once there had been only the ancient Apache camp, now there was something new, a bridge between 2 worlds. The settlement they'd built together occupied the valley below the canyon, a place where Apache and white families lived side by side in unprecedented harmony. Log cabins stood alongside traditional wickiups. Children of both cultures played together, learning each other's languages and customs. It was an experiment in peace that had drawn attention from across the territory. "The delegation from Santa Fe will be here within the hour," said Coda, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. His hands rested on her slightly rounded belly, where their first child grew. "Are you nervous?" she asked, leaning back against his solid warmth. "About the treaty negotiations? No, about becoming a father?" He chuckled, terrified. Vesper turned in his arms, studying the face that had become dearer to her than her own life. Marriage had changed them both. She had grown strong and confident. While he had learned to share the burdens he'd always carried alone, "You'll be a wonderful father," she said, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Just like you've been a wonderful husband." Their wedding had taken place 6 months ago, a ceremony that blended Apache and white traditions into something entirely new. Ayanna had performed the Apache rites while Judge Fitzgerald, who had traveled all the way from Millhaven, handled the legal requirements. The entire settlement had celebrated for 3 days. Mrs. Nightwolf called a familiar voice. They turned to see Captain Morrison approaching, no longer in cavalry uniform, but in the plain clothes of a territorial administrator. "The delegation has arrived." Morrison had become an unlikely ally after that confrontation at the canyon. Impressed by what he'd seen of the peaceful settlement, he'd helped navigate the complex legal and political challenges of establishing their community. His reports to the territorial government had been instrumental in gaining official recognition for their experiment in coexistence. "Any word from Dancing Bear?" Coda asked. "He's in the meeting lodge with the territorial representatives. They seem genuinely interested in making this official, extending the reservation boundaries to include your settlement and recognizing it as a model for future cooperation." Vesper felt a surge of pride. What had begun as her desperate need for sanctuary had grown into something that might change the relationship between Apaches and whites throughout the Southwest. "And Grim?" she asked quietly. Morrison's expression darkened. "Died in a saloon fight 3 months ago. Apparently, he'd moved on to abusing other vulnerable people and finally picked on someone who fought back." Vesper felt no satisfaction. In the news, only a weary sadness for the waste of a life. What about his store, sold to pay his debts? The new owner, a woman named Martha Henley, has already improved conditions for her employees dramatically. Morrison smiled. Word is, she was inspired by stories of the Apache settlement where people treat each other with dignity. That afternoon, as the negotiations concluded successfully, Vesper found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From the broken, terrified girl kneeling on Grimm's floor, to this a respected member of the community, a beloved wife, and soon to be a mother. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Yana asked, settling beside her on the bench outside their cabin. "Thinking about circles," Vesper replied, "how everything comes back to where it started, but changed. Ah, you begin to understand Apache wisdom. Da-da-da." Old woman smiled. "Pain circles back as healing. Hatred circles back as love. Endings circle back as beginnings. And broken things circle back as wholeness. Daughter, always as wholeness." That evening, as the settlement celebrated the successful treaty negotiations, Vesper and Coda stood together under the stars. Around them, their community thrived. Apache children learning to write English letters, while white children learned to track deer. Families of both cultures, sharing meals and stories and dreams for the future. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come into Grimm's store that day?" Vesper asked. Coda considered the question seriously. "I think the spirits would have found another way to bring us together. Some paths are meant to be walked, no matter how many obstacles are placed in their way. Even if it meant I had to suffer first, especially then." He turned to face her, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight from the celebration below. "Your suffering gave you compassion. Your pain gave you strength. Your healing gave you wisdom. Without that journey, you wouldn't be the woman you are now, the woman I love. It's the woman who helped build a bridge between two worlds." Vesper thought about that as she watched Apache and white children playing together, their laughter bright. As music in the desert air, her own hand moved to her belly, to the new life growing their child who would know no division between cultures, who would grow up in a world where love mattered more than the color of one's skin. Get on my horse, she said suddenly. Coda looked at her in confusion. What? That's what you said to me that first day. Get on my horse. The most important words anyone ever spoke to me.
Ain't now?
She smiled, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of starlight and promise.